Well, hello, everybody. My name is Brian Kilcourse with RSR Research, and I'm here to talk to my partner, Steve Rowen, today about a new workforce management report we just published this month in May of 2023. The name of the report is Retail in the Face of an Entirely New Workforce Model. We're excited about this report for a bunch of reasons, and so Steve's going to explain some of those reasons to you today. But first of all, how are you, Steve? How's everything going?
I'm doing well, man. Long time no see. How you been?
Been all right. I'm in California, you're in Texas, and our audience is in England. What could go wrong?
It sounds perfect.
Um, this is an exciting report. I was excited to participate in it, and I know you were too. So,
Yeah.
because there were some real differences that were teased out of the data this year, perhaps you could talk a little bit about what those differences were.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So, as you well know, if folks are familiar with RSR and what we do, we've been in business since 2007. And there's really two sides to our business. One is a research side, and the other is what we do with that research. The research side is what brings us here together today. Every year, we conduct anywhere between 10 to 12 benchmark reports where we go out, we survey retailers on one specific topic at a time and ask them, what's keeping you up at night? What are you doing about it? How is technology going to be able to help? We do not do any kind of competitive intelligence. We don't compare one solution provider to another. We want to know what retailers are facing and how the best of them are able to teach some lessons for everybody else to follow. It was a simple idea back in 2007. It turned out to be a really good one for us. And as Brian is well aware, Workforce is a report that we never get too far away from. I don't think we've ever gone more than 18 months without surveying retailers to say, what's happening here? And up until about 3 or 4 years ago, there was a pretty consistent theme among this research, which was publicly, retailers would go on any speaking tour that they could, go to big shows, United States, UK, France, Australia, wherever they might be. And no matter what the topic was that they were asked to talk about that day, they would start by saying, first, we want to thank our employees. They're our most valuable resource. They are the lifeblood of this company. And they would say that publicly. And then privately, they would very much enjoy the model that had been around for about 100 years, which is let's get young kids, let's get old folks, let's underpay them, undertrain them. And when they move on to something else because they're disgruntled, no problem. We have a whole line of people waiting to take their place. It was a really dirty secret, and it worked quite well. And despite a lot of bravado and lip service, employees, on rare occasion, they were shown an opportunity for a career, but by and large, retail was a fairly transient position. And as we started citing somewhere around maybe 2018 or 2019, change was afoot. This wasn't really working out for employees anymore. They were hip to the gig. They knew how it worked, and they weren't necessarily interested in working these types of low wage, low appreciation, low training jobs. People were coming to a place of, maybe I want my life to mean a little bit more than that. Maybe I don't just want to be a cog in the machine. All of a sudden, COVID pandemic, March of 2020, the world shuts down. Everything changes on a dime. And our workforce report ever since then has been a very different thing than it was in 2007, 2011, 2013, and so on and so forth. It's become much more of an investigation into, okay, retailers, you recognize that the model no longer works. What are you doing about it? How are you reacting to this new reality of the fact that people might not want to work these jobs? During COVID, it was a very unique thing because these were frontline jobs, right? People had to risk their health and safety to come out and be able to sell the rest of us lettuce and tomatoes. That's a very big difference from what we had seen in all the years leading up to it. So this report this year is nothing short of a sea change, because now on the backside of that, with historically low unemployment and with just an enormous amount of, I mean, you cannot visit a retail store today and not see a help wanted sign hanging in the window, no matter where you are. It's become a very different model, and it's really flipped back on retailers in a way that, one, they weren't expecting, and two, they certainly were not prepared for.
Interesting. So you mentioned several different things. Let me pick on a few of them. When I was a retail executive, we knew that when the economy was soft, when there was relatively high unemployment, retail was very desirable, and we could find people very easily. When unemployment is low, it's tough for retailers to find people because consumers, or not consumers, but retailers and employees have other choices. They can go other places. The
Sure.
other thing that's happened, and we've read about it in the newspapers, is my generation of people, the boomers, decided during COVID that retirement was a pretty good gig, and they just left.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and this has triggered some real changes in what the new pool of available employees expects out of a job. Can you talk a little bit about what the research shares?
Yeah, it was one of the very first things that we wanted to know. So if you're familiar with our research, we follow a framework where we ask retailers about the challenges they face coming from the outside world, how they're able to convert, how the best of them really are able to convert some of those challenges into opportunities. We always walk through what's the enemy within, what are the problems that you're facing as an organization, whether it's people or processes or internal technologies that don't work well together. And then lastly, we always ask about how is technology going to help you get out of this problem? But what we've started doing in recent years is before we even get into the framework, we put forward some what we call controversial statements, right? Just sort of how do what do you think about this? Does this fly? Does this not fly? And some of what you just brought up was exactly what we put forward in the very opening salvos of this report, of this research itself, which was one of the statements was boomer generation employees have chosen retirement over work. Rate your reaction to that. 88% of retailers agreed with that sentiment, and 51% of them agreed with it strongly. We typically don't see that. I mean, when you put forward this isn't highly controversial, but in the world that we operate in the retail ecosystem, something like that a couple of years ago would have received a very tepid response. All retailers agreed. Boomers have just decided to move on, to your point. And literally every one of the things that you just mentioned, one of them we put forward was younger employees have better opportunities elsewhere. 84% of retailers agreed with that, 44% strongly. And that is something we just have not seen. At both ends of the spectrum, you have unique challenges, right? Older folks have just said, it's not worth it. I'd rather enjoy my time. Younger folks have said, I can't envision a career being treated this way. And I think the way that we mentioned it in the report is it's really hard at a time when kids are being inundated with social media of, look how great my life is as a social media influencer, to say, you know what? I don't want to pursue my dreams. I'm just going to go fold sweaters. It's really difficult to do that, especially if you're not paying them. So it's a real challenge, and it happens at both ends of the spectrum. And let's not forget, in the middle as well. There are a lot of working people who have been cobbling together these minimum wage jobs, just trying to put food on the table for their young families. And they're looking elsewhere as well. So retailers have a real problem. And I think the most important takeaway from this report this year is at least they finally know it. They may have been whistling past the graveyard in years past, just saying, everything's fine, nothing to see here, this is all working well for us. Meanwhile, this sort of revolution has been happening underfoot. It's now out in the open, and they're well aware that they have a problem, especially in stores.
So at the same time, some of our other studies have highlighted the fact that the stores are being asked to do much more than they used to
Sure.
do. In the 20th century, of course, retailers, my generation of retail executives, perfected the self-service model. Where consumers went in, they basically did most of the work about order fulfillment, brought it all the way to the front of the store where it was checked out, and they even carried it out to their cars or to the train, whatever they needed to do. So it provided the opportunity for retailers to dramatically push down on their labor costs. But now new tasks are being assigned to those people. And that means new training, new technology, new costs. And it tends, we know this from our studies, tends to undercut the per order profitability of an omnichannel order.
Drastically.
Yeah. The other thing, of course, is that consumers don't walk into the store without a notion of what it is they want to buy and what they want to pay for it. They come in with the power of knowledge at their fingertips. How have those things changed the workforce in the store?
It's difficult to quantify. You touched on so many things there just now. Let's just pick up on one of them. We sometimes, if the topic bears it, we will turn around, we'll ask retailers, how are you faring here? What are you seeing? And then we'll turn around and ask consumers. And this is an area both in the store and with the workforce report where we've been doing that for the last year or two.
Mhm.
And what we find by and large is that when you ask retailers, when consumers come to your stores, what do you really need an associate to do? What are they there to do? And the answer is they're frozen in the past. 41% of retailers say that their absolute top one thing that they're asking employees to do is help consumers find the products that they're looking for. Now, you and I as consumers know that's just not true. But to verify that and validate it, we went out and asked consumers, when you walk into a store, what do you want an associate to do? And it's a very different answer. It's not to help me find products that I'm looking for. They already know what they're looking for. They've done an enormous amount of research on the most mundane of items before they've ever walked into a store. So they certainly don't walk in a blank page and say, what do you sell and can you sell me on it? It just doesn't happen anymore.
Right.
They walk in and say, I'm between two choices. And what they really want to engage that associate for is, do I not have to go to my phone right now or my mobile device? Can you help me make this decision right now based on your knowledge of it? Retailers have cut training, as we've talked about already quite a bit during this call. They're not providing associates enough training. They're not providing managers enough training. So in the end, when we play that scenario out with consumers and say, well, what do you do when you've walked in, you're at this point of decision, and the associate has proven to be not all that helpful? They say, I just asked them to go away and I solved the problem myself on my phone. Well, if that continues to be the trend, what do stores exist for? Do they purely
Right.
exist for people to walk in and say, I've done everything I can do in the digital world. I need to touch and see these items. Then I'll make my decision. And then, well, what's the very next thing you do? Well, the very next thing I do is then I use that same phone that has just helped me make my decision and say, somebody else have a better price elsewhere? And if so, then they turn around and leave the store without making even a purchase. So it's a very dangerous precedent that's been set where if retailers continue to operate under the assumption that what an associate is there for is to help consumers ideate what it is that they might want to purchase in the first place, that is not a path to a winning strategy. It's just not. Um, so we talk about this quite a bit in the report, and the report is available on our website for free. If you go to www.rsrresearch.com and you look under the recent insights section, this is the first report that'll pop up. One of the things that we say is it's one of the key takeaways of the report is if you don't know what else to do with a store associate at this point, at least give them the same consumer grade technologies that consumers already have to give them a fighting chance of being relevant. Let's stop the conversation about one-to-one personalization. Let's certainly abandon the conversation about helping retailers fill in the dots on a blank page of not knowing why they're even in the store in the first place. Let's at least give them a chance to be relevant. It's right down the middle there of that, highly curated personal touch or the ability to, help a person put together some concept of why did I even walk into the store in the first place? It has to be right down, be relevant. It's the very least you can do. And consumer grade technologies provide a real opportunity to do that.
So this is fascinating. I'm hearing a bunch of different things here, but one of them is that retailers need to be thinking about self-service in the 21st century,
Very much
which
so.
is a different model than 20th century self-service. But
Very
there are
much so.
conditions that situations in the store where consumers do need help from employees, and that has to be done in the context of the shopper's experience. So what I heard you say was that if shoppers use their iPhone, these things, to make smart decisions, then the employees need the same things. One last
Yeah.
thought: the younger generation of associates, of employees, use technology to talk with each other all the time. Is that a play in the retail world?
Yeah, there was actually a couple of different areas where we dug into this.
Mhm.
Um, Obviously the future is always pending. So we asked a lot we had a very strong line of inquiry with retailers about what do you think about the younger generation, what they want, what it is that
Right.
you think you can offer them that will become attractive enough for them to say, walk in and fill out a job application or to stay with you if they've already been working for you for a while. And
Right.
then of course we turned around and asked younger workforce eligible folks, what would it take? The short answer is younger retail employees and potential employees want a higher quality of life. They're thinking about things in a very different way than retailers typically have. They're looking for environments that celebrate inclusivity, including things like race and gender and social status of a company, because they have their choice. Again, just to go back to where we first started this,
Mhm.
there's a help wanted sign hanging in the window of almost every shop. So if you're a young kid looking to work in retail, you can pick and choose. And would you prefer to go work at a corporation that you disagree with at a fundamental level that operates, in a sort of soulless gray environment that doesn't offer you much chance for, improvement or a career path, and you disagree with the way that they operate, sustainably or socially? Of course not. You're going to choose a brand that you identify with. But the other thing that they tell us is we use these devices for everything. We use our smart devices to share photos, to share product suggestions. We want to be able to do that in store with consumers as well, because they're coming to us. We don't want this to be some sort of barrier. So when they're out potentially looking for new employment or maybe jumping from one brand to another, that's one of the areas where they're looking is this a tech savvy retailer? Am I going to be able to, do I have to use some, archaic device that I'm going to have to learn how to use? It's going to create this real barrier to being able to help the customer. Or am I going to be able to use something that I already know how to use? It's going to be up and running and I can have a real interaction, because people do want real interactions. We talk about it in the report. It's about as touchy feely as we've ever gotten in any of our hardened retail data. But you can feel these things when you walk into a store. You can tell almost instantly whether you're an associate or whether you're a customer or a potential customer. You know, is this an environment that I would want to be in for 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week? And a lot of things go into that. And one of them is what are the tech barriers to engagement?
Very interesting. Well, this
Yeah.
does bring us to our recommendations at the end of the report. And I should probably point out to the people who are listening to this that at the end of every report, we put together what we call bootstrap recommendations. And these essentially are recommendations that come out of the data in the survey itself. The overperformers tend to do different things than average and underperformers do, and those frequently form the basis of our recommendations. So, Steve, maybe you could go over some of the things that we recommend that retailers follow up on as a result of this report.
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't come as a surprise if you've been reading our stuff as we move stepwise from year to year where our recommendations go. A couple of years ago, we were saying things like, you really need to think about your associate pool as being non-expendable. This year is an extension of that. So one of the things that we talk about is that the needs of the workforce and the modernized store concept are really interrelated. That consumers have adopted all kinds of new ways of shopping, and associates need to increase productivity. You talked about this at the top of the call.
Right.
We've never met a retailer that doesn't say that they want to, that they want to spend more money on labor. They don't want to spend more money on labor, but we've reached the point where if you want your store environment to be fulfilling to a consumer to walk into and an associate to want to work there, it may well take some of that. So one of the recommendations we make is train people and pay people for performance. The lowest cost model is probably not going to be a path to success for very long, if it even has been in recent months. Um, One of the things we talk about, and this is a sticky wicket, and we could talk about it for a long time, is automating the store whenever possible. Um, Certainly, there's a large conversation here around automation. There's an even larger conversation probably around artificial intelligence and machine learning behind that automation. But one of the things that we feel pretty confident recommending is that the modern store, there's way too much time being spent executing routine tasks. And consumers don't give a lot of credit for those sort of things. So if there are opportunities, and this is on a case by case basis, we were consulting a retailer. One of the first things we would want to do is sit down and say, okay, let's look at your store and let's look at some of the things that you're asking associates to do that could be automated, and therefore free up your associates, the ones that you do have, the ones that do decide to show up for work that day and are engaged and are going to be helpful, do have a chance of sticking around. Let's make their jobs more interesting and let's make them more valuable to consumers as a result of that. There's a lot of recommendations in the report. We talked quite a bit about younger employees and their expectations. If we were to boil that down to a few things, some of what they tell us is, does the employer emphasize their well-being, the employee's well-being? Do they have an onboarding program that addresses ethics in a meaningful way? How transparent and open is management in their communications to the workforce? Is a really nice part of the report where we talk about communications and new communications tools that not only display, are an opportunity to show the brand's transparency to consumers, but also to employees and potential employees as well. And does the employer have an advancement program that addresses diversity and inclusion? Those are big things. We talk about the ability to be flexible. One of the things, this is again, it's just sort of a footnote here, but we spend quite a bit of time talking about it in the report. One of the things that associates tell us is most important when they're looking at retail brands and where they want to work is there flexibility in the schedule? Do I get to be my own boss to some measure? Do I get to swap schedules? Because again, a lot of these people have a lot going on at home. Maybe they're working 2 jobs. Maybe they're going to school. Maybe they're trying to work part-time while they're, also parenting. That flexibility is a really attractive thing for them. So we get pretty deep into each one of these in the report itself. But again, if we were to wrap it up into one thing, we're all consumers here. Look at your stores the way a consumer would, and you'll probably get a pretty good insight into how an associate might view it as well. Because it's readily apparent when a store is moving in the right direction and when it's sort of stuck in the past.
It's absolutely fascinating. It's consistent with some of the other reports that we've done that basically are saying that the old model, the mass merchandise model, stack them high and watch them fly and keep labor ratios down as low as possible. It's just not working. It's just not working. Consumers have very different expectations. The new generation of potential employees have very different expectations. In order to attract those people in the way that you need to keep your stores operating, you need to address those concerns. And that means something very different than before. I'm also struck by the fact that technology plays a significant part of this. I used to laugh when I walked into our own stores that the only visible technology you'd see in the stores at the point of sale station. And it was facing away from the consumers. Consumers had nothing to do with any of it. But now there's technology everywhere. The unfortunate part of that is that technology is being carried in the pockets and purses of the consumers while the poor employee is stuck trying to do things the old way. And that's unacceptable for everybody. So I'm struck by the fact that that retailers, in order to address workforce needs and consumer needs, are going to have to really address the 21st century store. Now it's ironic. This is the 23rd year, the 24th year.
Yeah. We're finally having 21st century conversations, nearly a quarter century in, but at least we're having them, right? At least we're having them.
There you go. Better late than never.
Yeah.
Well, I want to remind everybody listening to this that we are RSR Research, www.rsrresearch.com. Our research is free. All you have to do is sign on. We don't sell your name, so you don't have to worry about your privacy being violated. We encourage you to read it, share it with your colleagues and friends, and importantly, tell us what you think about it. We want to thank IORMA for sponsoring us in the UK. We're very delighted to have them in partnership with us, and we think that this research has some value to just about everybody. So please read it. Let us know what you think, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.